This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up? Real MVPs, Ricky Widmer here, along with nobody. You may notice, hey, Ricky, you are the only one on my YouTube screen, or if you're on podcast services around the world, hey, Ricky, you're the only one that I hear. What's going on? Why are you all alone? And that is because the Primetime Podcast, we are mixing some things up. Hopefully by next week, we have a back to more solid schedule for you guys. Primetime Podcast, followed by the debut edition of Superfans What's Your Fantasy, coming back to every Wednesday, and then on the weekend, obviously, the fast break. But I wanted to do a podcast today for you guys, the college football fans out there, because we're getting close to the season. Like next Monday, it's week 1, baby. We're getting there. Next week is week 1. So today I wanted to do my complete college football predictions, and how I am going to kind of bracket this off is the first one, I'm going to pick the winners. I'm going to go through all 5 Power 5 conferences, the ACC, the Pac-12, the Big 12, the SEC, the Big 10. That's the order I'm going to follow, by the way. I'm going to go through everyone, tell you what I think about not every team, but the ones I think could either compete or are the big talking points within each conference moving forward for this year. Give you who's going to win, what the record is going to be, and then obviously who's going to win those champ games. Then I'm going to move on after picking all of those winners. I'm going to break down the college football playoff, what my top 4 is, go through my thought process. Why am I thinking this? Why am I thinking that? And give you not only my top 4, but who's going to win the semifinal games, who's going to be the national champion at the end of the year. And then I'm going to wrap everything up with some good old Heisman talk. What do we got going on this year? We got a lot of quarterbacks, some running backs, wide receivers, maybe some defensive players that can throw their hat into the ring. But before I get into everything, make sure to check us out on patreon.com/most valuable podcast. If this studio is an eyesore, this little soundboard back here, we got the VCR TV behind me. If you want to help us get our own studio, because obviously this is not our studio, we graciously get to use this studio for no cost, but eventually want a studio of our own that looks better, that we can call the MVP headquarters. Patreon.com/most valuable podcast is how you help us get to that goal. Bronze, silver, and gold tiers. The gold tier, you get to call in and be on a podcast each and every month. You are at that tier, so we kind of give back for you guys helping us out, live our dreams. But let's get into everything. So, like I said in the first topic, the first segment, I'm going to break down to the best of my ability all 5 Power 5 conferences. And the order that I mentioned early on is the order I'm going to follow. And the reason I picked this order was because it's kind of the interest that I have this year for college football in the conferences. Like the ACC, I'm not very interested in this year. I think it's going to be the more boring conference. The Pac-12, little bit more interesting than the ACC, but still might not affect anything at the end of the year when we get to the college football playoffs. We'll have to wait and see. The Big 12, a little bit more interesting. Jalen Hurts, Oklahoma, Texas, and Sam Ehlinger. How are they going to do over there in Austin? And then the Big 2, the SEC, that's got some big teams in it this year. And then the Big 10, which is obviously, to me, maybe I'm biased, the most interesting of the conferences this year because of Big Boy Michigan. And can they finally get over the hump? But also the complete questions we have with the western side of the Big 10. But let's get into it. The first conference we will look at is the ACC. And like I said, to me, this is the boringest conference in college football. And ACC fans, I'm not trying to say that as a knock against you guys. I say that only because of what, and I know Miami fans, Virginia Tech fans, Florida State fans, Syracuse fans, all you guys that are in the running are going to say, no, we can upset Clemson. Let's be honest. Unless Trevor Lawrence, knock on wood here on the old board that we got, unless he goes down with an injury, Clemson is most likely going to win the ACC. Will they go perfect? Probably. But even if they lose a game, they're probably going to go perfect this year. And that's basically for the Atlantic side. That's who I've got winning it. I've got Clemson 12-0 this year, 8-0 in conference. And the big thing is, like, in the ACC, I don't see any teams kind of giving them some trouble this year. I'll pull up the schedule to give out exactly like a little game by game in the conferences that I'm looking at. But non-conference wise, they play Texas A&M, they play South Carolina. Now, although I obviously think they are going to get wins in those games, South Carolina is probably the one of that I put down as kind of just to be respectful to Carolina. Do I think that Clemson is going to win that game? Yes. But South Carolina, that's a rivalry game. They're a tough team. They could get the upset. Texas A&M is the SEC team that I'm looking at to have the best chance. Like, if Clemson goes down this year, it will be at the hand of Fisher and the Aggies, a coach that knows Dabo Swinney, knows this coaching staff, knows how they like to play. It's just, can that Aggie team get it done? And that's the reason why I'm picking Clemson to win the Atlantic side at a perfect 12-0 is because, like I said, Dabo Swinney has the best and most consistent, I'll say, coaching staff in college football. Literally has not changed for years. They're rolling that back for another year. And then they have arguably the best quarterback in all of college football. Like, you could like Tua, you can like Jalen Hurts. In my mind, Trevor Lawrence is the best quarterback in the nation. And when you have that best quarterback in the nation, you're probably going to go far. And that's why I got Clemson winning it. However, the thing I will throw out there is Syracuse and Florida State both interest me on this side. And I know that you're saying, well, Ricky, how can they interest you when you said this conference was going to be a boring conference? And the reason I say interest me is they're obviously going to be fighting for second place, obviously. And I know that Florida State fans and Syracuse fans are going to get mad at the tone of my voice. Well, obviously. But the thing that I look at with them is, for Florida State, the big guy I look at, and of course, defensive-minded guys are going to say, hey, you got to look at the defense, but how my mind works is I am a offensive-dominated guy, so that's why I might reference the offense more than the defense. But I look at a guy like Cam Akers, a guy that I remember last year, Brandon and I talking about, and can he make the next step? Well, now he's a junior. Can he, how much is he going to contribute to this team? I know this team, I saw a post on Twitter that's basically Florida State hasn't been the same since DeAndre Francois went down with an injury, but it's actually true. And the quarterback is what I look at. You got Blackman coming back this year, some injury problems of his own. I know you guys got Alex Hornibrook also. And to me, that's going to be interesting. Who is going to be, in my mind, who's going to be the starter for this team? Because I would like to think that Blackman would be the starter. He's been here. He's got the cred in Florida State, but really doesn't have the wins to go along with it. Like, if they were a 1-2 loss team last year and were winning 10, 11 games, then it's like, well, you know what? No, he's not going to get unseated. But when you see the season you saw last year, it allows for a guy like Hornibrook to come over as a graduate student and possibly take the job from Justin Blackman or James Blackman. And to me, that's the big thing. And I look at Syracuse kind of in the same sense of this Dino Baber squad kind of came out of nowhere last year, where I got behind them as a Cinderella, would pick them week in and week out. And they're also coming in with a quarterback where it's like, are they going to go with the senior transfer in Clayton Welsh, or are they going to go with the sophomore in Tommy DeVito? And both these teams kind of have the same situation to go with is, do we go with the guy who's been here, who might be young, but at least he's been here, or is this new person, a Hornibrook graduate student, a Welsh transfer student who's a senior? Are they going to be able to take the job away from these young quarterbacks? And that's why I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with Florida State, what happens with Syracuse. But bottom line of it all, I've got the Clemson Tigers winning the Atlantic. And this is kind of the one where it's like, hey, Ricky, it's the most boring of the sides. That's why I wanted to do it first, to get it out of the way. To go into the next part, the Coastal, this is where it gets a little bit more of a discussion with these teams. And for me, it comes down to three teams that could possibly win the Coastal side. And the first one I want to talk about are the Miami Hurricanes. How I see Miami playing out this year is I've got them 9-3 overall, 6-2 in the conference. Their 3 losses on the year will be to Florida, neutral site game, home against Virginia, and at Florida State. And I know what you're saying. I know you fans are throwing up the U right now. Ricky, how could we lose to both Florida and Florida State? Well, the Florida one, I think Florida's going to be a better team. Am I a Filippo Franks believer? No, I am not. But I think they will be a better team this year. The Florida State one is interesting to me because the quarterback discussion I had, they could struggle, which I could easily see then that game flipping over to being a U kind of a win. I just look at it and I go, that one's in Tallahassee. So it's going to be, your backs are already, like, I know the backs are already up against the wall. It's a rivalry game. Anyone can win a rivalry game. But it being in Tallahassee later in the season, I think will give some spark to those Seminoles, and they might be able, like, they might have their situation figured out by the time they play you guys. The big question I have with Miami, yet again, same thing I had with Florida State and Syracuse, but it's kind of not a question in my sense. Like, I know that Perry's still on the team. You got Tate Martell coming in to possibly be the quarterback. Like, in my mind, Tate Martell would not have transferred to Miami if there wasn't a good, if not great chance that he was starting. And the quarterbacks that are on the roster, I was looking it up because I was trying to remember that last one. You've got Jaron Williams, who's a redshirt freshman. I don't think he starts. I think he's too young. Then you've got Tate Martell, redshirt sophomore, transferring in from the Ohio State University. And then N'Kosi Perry, who, of course, redshirt sophomore, split time last year with Rozier, and same situation, but on a different sense. Like, I think this Miami team is better than I'll say that. I'm going to backtrack that statement. They might be better than Florida State and Syracuse a little bit, but the big thing is if Miami was in the Atlantic side, they'd be in the same boat as Florida State and Syracuse in my mind, where they'd be fighting for second place. So they're Hurricane fans, you're kind of lucky that you're in the Coastal, but Tate Martell is the guy that I expect to be the starter for the Hurricanes, just because, like I said, I don't think he would transfer over if he didn't have a pretty good mindset that he was going to start after what happened at Ohio State. Then the other two, I've got Virginia. Them I actually have going a little bit better than Miami, 10-2 on the year, 7-1 in conference. Their only losses will be to that Miami squad I talked about because it is in Miami, so it's going to be on the road, so I'll give it to the Canes. And then at Notre Dame, I think Notre Dame is going to be a very good team this year with Ian Book at quarterback, to where Virginia will get the job done at home. It's just those 2 road games. Like, they're going to lose in ACC and they could get upset. I know that, like, the game last year I looked at when doing these predictions I was like, could they see like an NC State upsetting them? And I was like, I kind of thought about it and I was like, well, with NC State, like, they had Ryan Finley last year. They don't have Finley this year, obviously. I think Virginia will have a better record this year. They'll be a better team. And they've got a quarterback coming back this year. So I have them at 10-2. Pretty simple. They get the job done at home. They lose to Miami, lose to Notre Dame. And then the other team, the Virginia Tech Hokies, where I would love to be able to basically what it was a couple years ago when Mitch Trubisky was at North Carolina. It was Trubisky in North Carolina fighting with the VT to basically who's going to play Clemson. And I look at it in this sense of Virginia Tech this year is not going to have a very good season. And I say good season where it'll be a winning season, but you're not going to be up there with Virginia. You're not going to be a 2-loss team. I have them as a 4-loss team this year. Virginia Tech will be 8-4 at the end of the regular. All these records, by the way, are at the end of the regular season. I forgot to say that, but 8-4, 5-3 in conference, losses to Miami. Well, at Miami, at Notre Dame. That's another thing. You're at Miami and Notre Dame, and then at Virginia. So, and I know you're saying, Ricky, there's only 3 in there. Those 3 games are going to be tough because they're all on the road. So I'm going to lean towards the home teams in those. Miami's a tough team. Virginia's a tough team. Notre Dame's a tough team. And then I think there is going to be a random team in the ACC. It's going to be a conference loss. So your only non-conference loss, Hokie fans, is going to be at Notre Dame. But I think there is going to be another team in this conference that gets it done. And I say that where it's like, you go into that game, we're all thinking, oh, VT's going to win. I'm picking them to win. Corso's picking them to win. And then they just drop the ball. And the one that I look at, and I almost want to say it's going to be this game, I could see week number 1 at Boston College. Another game on the road because, yet again, going into Blacksburg, Virginia is tough. It's not easy to play in Blacksburg. I could almost see like an August 31st opening weekend at Boston College. The Eagles get the best of the Hokies, and then they right the ship against Old Dominion, against Furman, before losing the 3 that I said. But there will be, I think, a team some point in this year, besides those 3 on the road, that just get a random upset over the Hokies. So that's where that 4th loss comes in. So if you're keeping track at home, that means Clemson at 12-0. They win the Atlantic side of the conference. With the other 3, Miami, although they beat Virginia, that loss against Florida State is just going to keep them out because they'd have the tiebreaker, but lose to Florida State. Now you're at 2 conference losses. VT is obviously out because they lost to both Miami and Virginia. I got the Virginia Cavaliers playing the Clemson Tigers in the ACC title game. And this one's easy for me. The Clemson Tigers are going to win the ACC. They'll go 12-0, make it a 13-0 after the title game, and they will be probably one of my playoff teams to spoil that one. Like, there is no question about it. I like Clemson this year. They're going to win the ACC, and then we'll see where they kind of stack out when everything is said and done. But we'll move ahead into the next conference. The Pac-12 conference is what we are looking at. And with this one, we'll start in the North. To me, it's a 2-dog race in the North. And it's going to be Oregon and it's going to be Washington. And both these guys led by the quarterbacks, Jacob Eason, Justin Herbert. Which one is going to get it done for his team this year? And when it comes to Oregon, I think they got 2 losses on the year. I've got them at 10-2 overall, 8-1 in the Pac-12. Almost said Pac-10, but Pac-12. Pac-10 was years ago. I think they and I almost changed this one, but I didn't. I left it in. I almost changed it, but I'm gonna leave it in. I think that Oregon loses to Auburn to start the season. And I really almost wanted to change it because, like, Auburn to me is not going to be the same Auburn team that we're used to, but I think it's going to be a different style than Oregon is used to. So, and also being on a neutral site, I don't think that Oregon's going to have the best game to open up the season. So I'm going to give it to the Tigers. They'll get the win to shock. And then the only other loss for the Oregon Ducks is going to be at Washington, where really it's going to come down to how do these teams play? Who gets the better record in conference? And I think it's going to be Washington. It's almost the same thing with Miami and Virginia, where it's Washington beats the Ducks, but they're going to have a worse record in conference. That's where Washington comes in. I got them 10-2 also, but both of those losses are going to come in conference. I think they get it done against Oregon. With that being in Washington, it's going to go towards the Huskies' favor. But the thing that favors Oregon to me in this two-team race is that Oregon does not have to play Utah. The two losses I have for Washington, at Arizona and then at home against Utah. I really like Utah this year. I'll get into that a little bit when it comes to the other side, obviously, because that's where Utah is. I think that Utah is going to be a really tough team. Like, they're the favorites to win the Pac-12 in my mind. And I think it's going to be Washington. The game against Arizona is going to be a tough one. Like, it's also going to be a tough game for the Oregon Ducks also. And I got to double check with Oregon really quick. Are they playing? Oh, wait. I'm going to check. Do they play Arizona? Or am I just assuming that they are? I thought that the Oregon Ducks played Arizona. They do, but it's at home. It's at Eugene. So that's where my mindset is. You've got in Eugene, Ducks get the win over the Wildcats. Because the Huskies are playing at Arizona, I think Arizona is going to be, it's almost like what we saw last year in the Duck-Arizona game, where I got to go back to it. Yeah, I don't know if it's 44-15 like we saw in that Oregon-Arizona game, but I think that Arizona, because Washington's coming into town, they could probably upset the Huskies. So I've got that upset happening, and then obviously Utah is going to get it done against the Huskies. That means to me, out of these two, they're both 10-2, but Oregon's got the better record in conference, 8-1. So although they lose to the Huskies, they have a better record overall in conference, and they will go to the Pac-12 title game and win the North. On the South, I think it's kind of almost similar to the Pac-12 Atlantic. I think that Utah is the team you look at to win the, like, if Utah doesn't win the South, we look at it going, what the hell is going on with this team? What happened this year, or what injury happened this year? Because I've got them at 12-0. I've got them at, what would that be, 9-0 in conference. And Washington will be, like, although I said they'll beat Washington, Washington will be tough. Like, that's not going to be an easy win for them. And then they've got USC and they've got Arizona State on the road. The only thing, and I'll get into both of those two teams in a second, is, well, USC I'll get into in a second. With Arizona State, new quarterback, and also N'Keal Harry's not there. Like, there were games that I looked at where it's like, oh, well, they beat Oregon because N'Keal Harry caught 3 touchdowns. Well, N'Keal Harry's not going to be there. They lost a big weapon, so I'm not really as high on Arizona State as I was last year. But Utah, I think they're just going to win everything in the Pac-12 in the regular season, 12-0, 9-0 in conference. Also, Washington State, they do play. So they've got USC on the road, and then Arizona State and Washington State are at home. But N'Keal Harry, not at Arizona State. And then Washington State, that's what I was thinking. Washington State, they don't have Gardner Minshew this year. So 2 teams that I'm not high on, and I think Utah gets the win. Also, I mean, they've got Tyler Huntley coming in at quarterback again. They got Zach Moss returning, and then 3 of their 4 starting receivers are returning from last year. So it's one of those where it's like they're going to be loaded on offense. Unless something goes catastrophically wrong, they'll probably win every game this year in my mind. And the only team I think that will challenge them is possibly the Trojans, but I'm not even believing myself in that one, where I've got the Trojans at 6-5, 4-5 in the Pac-12. They'll lose at home against Stanford, at home against Utah, at Washington, at Notre Dame, home against Arizona, and home against Oregon. Like, this is going to be a team where it's 6-6, 4-5, where it's like, they did not have a good year, and I'm not high on JT McDaniels. I'm just not high on him, and I don't think that he's going to be the guy to bring USC a winning season. Other questions I have on this side of the Pac-12, UCLA, how are they going to be in Chip Kelly's second year? I saw some other sites that had them possibly the second best team behind Utah. I don't know if I'm going to get behind that yet. Like, I know they've got Dorian Thompson-Robertson, if I said that right, DTR, coming back to play quarterback, the dual threat guy who I believe was the second dual threat quarterback in his recruiting class. So they got him coming back. What do we expect from him? They're a question that'll be interesting to look at this year. And then the biggest question is this Arizona team, this Kevin Sumlin Arizona team. Will Khalil Tate take the step that I want? Like, I was the biggest Tate fanboy last year, and he let me down. I said this when Sean brought him up on our sleepers or dark horses for this year. Khalil Tate, I was all over him last year, and this year I'm kind of taking a step back to where I'm like, is he going to be the guy that I thought he was going to be last year? That's the question I want to see and that's why you can kind of see in some of my predictions so far in the Pac-12 is I've got Arizona beating Washington. I've got Arizona. They could be a tough team for Utah to play. I've got them beating USC. I think they're going to be better this year, although Kevin Sumlin's teams, what was it used to be like? 8-3 bullshit, 8-4 bullshit. Is that what we used to say, Brandon and I? But I think they will be better. But looking at the records, I've got Oregon winning the North at 8-1 in conference. I've got the Utah Utes, 2 Utes, not 1 Utes, winning the South. And this is where I have an upset. In the Pac-12 title game, I know Utah fans are going to say, blasphemy, Ricky, you are wrong. That's your choice, your decision. None of these are going to be right, but it's fun to make predictions, so that's why I'm doing this. I got Oregon over Utah, and this is going to throw a wrench into everything because Utah would be a team, they're perfect, they're a playoff team. This will be a game that obviously in the next segment throws a wrench into everything. So I got the Oregon Ducks. They are 11-2 then after the conference game. Utah 12-1 after the Pac-12 title game. And let's move on. The next one we are looking at, if you notice the jump cut on YouTube, it's because camera ran out. I figured this was a good place to kind of manufacture that jump cut so that I didn't have to stop mid-train of thought to hit the camera. But for this one, there's really 3 teams that I'm looking at. And before I get into those 3 teams, I just want to throw a question out to Big 12 Nation out there is, should we expect any, and Pat, I'm talking to Pat too, one of our patrons who's a Kansas fan. What do you guys think Les Miles is going to do this year? Does Kansas win a game? Does Les Miles get Kansas a game? That's my big question for the Big 12. But to me, it's a 3-team race. You got Oklahoma, you got Texas, and you've got Iowa State. And for me, let's start with Oklahoma because they are the most interesting team for me in this conference. Jalen Hurts coming in, CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver. I think these guys, and I'm using my clap hands, these guys will put up numbers like Marquise Brown and Baker Mayfield. That is what I believe, if not better. Like, CeeDee Lamb and Jalen Hurts are going to be a perfect marriage, and both of them are going to have a really nice season, and it's going to be really fun to watch. But Oklahoma this year, I have them 12-0, perfect on the year, 9-0. Obviously, if they're perfect in the conference as well. However, I will say, Red River rivalry, Red River shootout, however you want to say it, Red River, however you want to say it, it's going to be a tough game. Like, the Texas-Oklahoma rivalry is a big rivalry for a reason. Not going to say that Oklahoma's going to get to that 12-0 very easily. They will have a tough game against Texas in that Red River showdown. And then there's always the random Oklahoma States, the random Texas Tech games that could be close for the Sooners. Like, who would have guessed last year with Kyler Murray that Army would have brought Oklahoma to overtime? Like, there's going to be a game like expect it. Texas is going to be a close game, and then there's going to be a random Big 12 conference team that is also bringing the Sooners to the edge. I think with Jalen Hurts, I think this is like, because I looked back, and this is the big thing of like when I looked at the Oklahoma season, is I looked at it and I went, okay, we haven't seen Jalen Hurts as a starter in obviously 2 years. He was the starter in Alabama for 2 years. Then the Georgia game happened, and then it was the Tua Tagovailoa show from then out. But like, I look at those other 2 seasons for Alabama, and if you look at their full schedules and results, like, Jalen Hurts didn't have bad years. He was over a 2,000-yard receiver, almost had 3,000 yards that first year, 23 and 17 touchdowns. And that second year, he, in 14 games, only threw 1 interception. He had 10 interceptions combined. He threw 9 that rookie year, that freshman year, but then even 2 the last year that he was in Alabama last year. And you look at his freshman year, this was a team where the first game they beat USC, although let's be honest, like, that wasn't a game, but that was his coming out party. And that was the start of the Jalen Hurts show. They also had close games against Ole Miss. They beat ranked opponents like Arkansas, Tennessee, Texas A&M, LSU, Auburn, Florida, and then obviously Washington before losing to Clemson. And then even in 2017, you look at that, the schedule is a little bit easier. Florida State, yet again, didn't expect DeAndre Francois to go down, but they won 27-7 in that one. But they run through. The only other team they lost to was Auburn that year, but then Auburn lost to Georgia, allowed Alabama to sneak in ahead of Ohio State. They go ahead and beat a Clemson team that probably shouldn't have been number 1. That was the Kelly Bryant Clemson team that was only there because Auburn beat Alabama in the Iron Bowl. And then obviously the championship game where he got benched, and then it became the Tua Tagovailoa show. And I expect him to be the same here in Oklahoma. I expect this team to win a lot of games, probably go perfect. Texas will be the only one that is the real tough game, but knowing Oklahoma, they'll probably be a game. Like, I say they'll be a close game because of Oklahoma's history, not Jalen Hurts's. But the question is, was Jalen Hurts really good, or was just Alabama really good? And that's the big question that we're going to have to answer this year. Then the other 2, obviously, Texas, who plays in that Red River Showdown game. I've got Texas at 10-2 this year, 8-1 in the conference. They're going to have losses to LSU and to Oklahoma. The Oklahoma game is obviously going to be one of the ones of, will they be the home team or not in that Big 12 title game. I think these are, spoiler alert, sorry Cyclone fans, these are the top 2 teams in the conference. Like, their game will only decide, like, the loser of that game will then be walking on rougher eggshells than the other, because if they lose or get upset, there's a chance they're not in that title game. But I mean, Sam Ellinger coming back for another year. That's going to boost them. They've got Colin Johnson and Devin Duvernay or Duvernois. I think it's Duvernay on the outside. They're going to be big weapons for Ellinger. It's just, can they get it done the thing with Texas is, can they get it done against the Sooners? Because obviously they got to beat them once. Like, if I'm a Texas Longhorn fan, I'm almost fine losing the first matchup if that means I beat you in the Big 12 title game. But can they handle Oklahoma, and can they handle the upsets? Because like I said, if they lose the Red River rivalry game, then it's just okay, now we really have to avoid. If we get upset by an Oklahoma State, if we get upset by a Kansas, a Texas Tech, then we're really shit out of luck, because then that allows the Iowa State Cyclones to throw their hat in the situation. And when it comes to that ISU team, I think they're a 9-3 team, 7-2 in the conference. Their only two losses are going to be Oklahoma and Texas in the conference. Oklahoma at home, Oklahoma on the road, Texas at home. That's why I think that Red River Showdown game is more important for them, because if they lose it, ISU is going to be on the road. That when it's a road game, it's harder to win on the road, obviously, than it does at home. And then I think ISU loses to Iowa this year. I think it's going to be a close game. It's always a tough game, even when one of the teams is complete dog shit. But I think Iowa gets the win in that one. So 3 losses, 2 in conference for Iowa State, keeps them just out of the running for the Big 12 title game. And that means we get a Red River rivalry rematch in the Big 12 title game. But I don't think nothing changes here. You've got Oklahoma, Texas. Oklahoma beats Texas. Jalen Hurts throws his team's hat into the college football playoff sweepstakes to see if they can get in. Then we move on to the SEC. First, we'll start in the East. There's 2 teams that, last year it was 3 teams. It was Georgia, Florida, Kentucky. I don't think Kentucky is competing for the top of this division. I'll be honest, just putting Florida's name in this discussion is me being nice to Gator Nation. Because as I said earlier, I'm not a Felipe Franks stan. I'm not going to be standing on the mountaintop being like I'm proclaiming the gospel of Felipe Frank. But this is going to be a hard division for anyone not named Georgia to win. And Georgia, I've got them 12-0, 8-0 in conference. The game against Notre Dame will be close because, I look at it 2 years ago. Of course, it was Wimbush in that game and not Ian Book. This time it's Ian Book. I know it's at Georgia, not in South Bend, but I still think that'll be a close game for Notre Dame. And then Florida, I've got them at 10-2, 6-2 in the SEC. They're going to lose to LSU, lose to Georgia. And really, I think this is almost a situation of like Clemson in the ACC, where I think Georgia runs away with this side. It's just, can one of those teams, and even when I say can one of those teams upset Georgia, that's what I was going to say. Can one of those teams upset Georgia? But then I say that, and I almost think to myself, but yeah, Florida, even if they upset Georgia, yeah, because if they upset Georgia, they can still lose to LSU and win the tiebreaker. So I will say that. Can a Florida? Can a Kentucky? Can they stay to where they're only one more 0-1 loss extra in the conference, but then beat Georgia? I don't think so. I think Georgia runs away with this side, and if they lose, it's going to be out of conference to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. That's the only game I could see Georgia losing in the regular season. Then in the West, Alabama, Tua coming back. You got Ruggs and Judy. I know that I saw that Sanders, their running back, could miss this year. I think it was a foot injury. Bama Nation helped me out there. But Sanders could miss, but they still have solid weapons on that offense. I think they're 12-0, 8-0 in the SEC. Obviously, they're going to have tough games within this side of it. And to me, it comes in the form of 2 games. it comes in the form of at Texas A&M. I talked about them a little bit when I looked at the ACC. So Alabama is at Texas A&M this year, and they got LSU at home. Those are the two games that I feel will give Alabama some trouble. Of course, there could be a game like Mississippi State the other year where, if Mullins hits it in the back of the end zone, they win that game. But I look at it where Texas A&M, LSU, those are the ones. And how I see those other teams playing out is I see LSU being right behind Alabama. They're going to be 11-1, 7-1. They've got the best DB group in the SEC. They've got the second best linebacking group in the conference. They're going to be a defensively led team. And can Joe Burrow do enough offensively? Can he, in his last year with the Tigers, carry this team to prominence in this division? I think it winds up being 11-1, and the only team they lose to is that Alabama team. So that's the 1-2. And then Texas A&M, I want to say that they will be better. I just think they are a year away from maybe being a year away. And the reason I say that is I know they got a big quarterback recruit coming in from this upcoming recruiting class, but I just look at their schedule and they're at Clemson. They're in Athens to play Georgia. They're at LSU. Those are 3 losses right off the bat. And then you got Alabama. So to me, they're 8-4 overall, 5-3. And that's if they don't upset any of these. Obviously, there's a chance they could, but I don't see them going into Clemson and getting the win. I don't see them going into Athens and getting the win. I don't see them going into Baton Rouge and getting that win. Could they beat Bama at College Station? There's a chance. I just am not going to put my money. I'm not going to be that guy to put my money on the Aggies to beat the Tide. So 8-4, 5-3 for them. So that means that we've got 12-0 Georgia going up against 12-0 Alabama. And this one's as easy as flipping a coin for me, meaning it's difficult. I'm going to be different, though, from probably a lot of people, where a lot of people are going to go and say Tua Tagovailoa and this team is going to win, this team being Alabama. I'm going to go with Georgia to get the win over the Alabama Crimson Tide. And the reason why I am going to say that is because Kirby Smart defensively. Now, will this be the best defensive unit that he's had? No. I think about, 2 years ago? The year they were in that championship game was probably the best defensive unit that he's had at Georgia. And I don't think this team defensively will be quite up there. Bulldog fans, let me know if I'm spewing garbage, because obviously you guys are around your team every day. I'm just giving you the outside opinion. I just think Georgia and Kirby Smart, Kirby Smart knows how to handle Tua Tagovailoa, because it was you look at it, and let's look back to last year. Let's take a little bit of a journey to where the game that they played, yes, I know that Alabama got the win, but to me, the only reason they got the win was because Jalen Hurts was there to save Tua. Where last year in that SEC championship game, you had a guy like Jake Fromm throw for 3 touchdowns, 300 yards. Tua didn't have that hot of a game. He threw only 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, just broke 160 yards. And I think that this Georgia defense will be good enough. And I kind of feel like that's a slight on Georgia saying good enough. I don't mean it as that. I think they'll be good against Alabama to force Tua into that same kind of a performance. The only difference this year compared to last year is Alabama doesn't have Jalen Hurts. He's going to be in Norman, Oklahoma. So, for me, that's my reasoning for why I picked Georgia over Alabama when they meet in the SEC title game. And then moving on, the very last conference I have is the Big Ten. To me, this is the most interesting conference, and it's not just because I live in the state of Illinois, because our team sucks. I'm sorry, Lovey, but we do. I think this is interesting because not only on the West is it a complete crapshoot, I should say. That's the proper term. But this is finally the year, and I know Michigan, I'm just going to say this. I know Michigan fans out there are saying, there's no pressure if Jim Harbaugh does. There's absolutely pressure. There's got to be. Like, I know you guys as fans are probably talking like that because you don't want to put pressure on yourself this year, and I'm not blaming you, but like, there has to be pressure for Jim Harbaugh to get it done. And the reason why I say that is this team could be one of the best, I'll say one of the best defensive teams that Jim Harbaugh had at Michigan. Offensively, like, yeah, you've got Shane coming back this year to play quarterback, but like, your wide receivers, you've got weapons coming back, and not just coming back, coming off of injury that weren't even there last year that you got coming back. So, I mean, for me, that's the interesting thing. Can Michigan get it done and silence the doubters? Or can they make the believers, or even this is the point of the year where it's like, if you put Michigan in the championship game, Michigan's going to let you down, and this is the time where everyone backs Michigan. But then there's also Michigan, like those side, the Michigan haters. So can Michigan silence the haters in a sense? And for me, regular season wise, kind of ran through it. Can Jim Harbaugh get it done now that Urban Meyer's not at Ohio State? I think they do. And can Michigan beat ND? That's really the big thing. Like, those two things. And then can you avoid an upset against like an Iowa on your schedule? I've got Michigan 12-0, 9-0 in the Big Ten. I think they get it done. Ohio State, they're right behind them. 11-1, 8-1. Could Nebraska upset OSU in Nebraska, in Lincoln? You're damn right they could. The only reason I throw that out there is Martinez is not a freshman. Well, Justin Fields ain't either, but Martinez isn't with his first year with the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Justin Fields is. So if Fields makes mistakes in that game, the Cornhuskers could easily win. But how I see it, the only team that will beat Ohio State this year is in Ann Arbor, is the Michigan Wolverines. And I know that's going to be a controversial pick, whatever way. If you pick against it, Michigan fans are against you. And if you pick for it, Ohio State fans are against you. I get it. But I look at it, what was it? Was it last? I forget if it was last year or 2 years ago. Like, I honestly forget. The game where, I think it was last year, was in, no. Was it? Or was it the first year? Basically, the game where it was in Columbus, it was in the Horseshoe, and Michigan was winning. They should have won, went to overtime. And then there was that call where it was on like a 4th down, and the referee called it one way where it obviously was the other way, and Michigan kind of got screwed by the refs, and Ohio State went on to win. They should have beat Ohio State then, so I think they'll have the chance to do it this year. Just the question is, will they get it done? And then in the West, and I know this is one that I know Matt next week wants to come on and talk about, is who's going to win the Big Ten West? And I'll kind of work backwards up in this sense, where Northwestern and Wisconsin, they're probably the easiest picks for the reasons of they're usually at the top, but I don't think they're going to have good seasons. I think both of these teams are 7-5. Northwestern, I'll start with Northwestern. 7-5, 5-4 in the Big Ten. They're going to lose at Stanford, lose at Wisconsin, lose at Nebraska, and then lose at home to Ohio State and Iowa. Like, those are, like, Wisconsin's going to be tough. You play them in Madison. Ohio State and Iowa are going to be really good this year. And then Nebraska, I'm higher on Nebraska maybe than most, but I think they're going to have a better year this year. So 7-5, 5-4 for the Wildcats. Then you got Wisconsin. I think they're 7-5, but they're 4-5 in the conference. And the reason why I say that is they're going to lose to Michigan. They're going to lose at Columbus against Ohio State. They're going to lose to Iowa, and they're going to lose to Nebraska. Like, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, that's 5. The only difference is that they both have 5 losses, but Wisconsin's are all coming in conference, where Northwestern will have that one that's out of conference. Like, that's the only difference I see between these teams, because they've got questions at quarterback coming in, and I just don't think they'll be that strong of a team, although Wisconsin will have Jonathan Taylor as their running back this year. Then you've got the 2 that I think will be in the running for the Big Ten West. You have Iowa, who I've got at 11-1. They will probably win it. They will be 8-1. Their only loss will be to Michigan. Then there's Nebraska, and I should have done this in reverse, but I had them written down this way. Nebraska, I think, will be 9-3, 6-3 in the conference. Losses to Iowa, Ohio State, and then I think I put Maryland down. I think Maryland on the road could be a game where Nebraska gets upset. Upset. It's going to be a tough game, basically. Like, Maryland balls out. So they're 9-3. They're going to be out of it. Wisconsin and Northwestern aren't going to be at the top of the division to kind of take that away from Iowa. So I got Iowa at 11-1. They win the West. Michigan at 12-0. They're going to win the East. And this is where I'm going to have a little bit of another controversial pick in my Big Ten title game. So Iowa lost to Michigan earlier because they went to Ann Arbor. But I think Iowa getting a second look, like, this is how I feel this Big Ten title game is going to play out. It's going to be on a neutral site. It's going to be Iowa's second look at Michigan. They're not going to be playing at Michigan. They're going to be at a neutral site, so I'm going to nail that home again. And then number 2, how does Michigan handle the emotions of beating Ohio State? And I kind of have a sense, and this is yet again a prediction. So will it play out like this? We'll have to wait and see. This is just how I'm feeling. So I feel like Michigan's going to put so much, and we're going to put so much stock in, can Michigan beat Ohio State? Can they beat it? To where they almost give it all in that game, to where it's like, yes, we won the Super Bowl. Oh, wait, there's games after this. And that's where I think Iowa gets the better of Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan Wolverines to win the Big Ten title game. So just to recap really quick, to roll through it, this was a long segment, but thank you guys for sticking with me. Clemson wins the ACC. They will have a perfect record. Oregon will win the Pac-12. They will be 11-2 after that game. Oklahoma 13-0. They will win the Big 12. Georgia at 13-0 will win the SEC. And then Iowa at 12-1 will win the Big 10. So if we're on podcasts, or if you're on podcast services around the world, I'm going to chug right through. But if you're on YouTube, let me know what you guys are thinking down below of everything that I've talked about in this segment. Who do you guys think will win each conference? What are some of your questions? What teams do you think will play well? Are there teams that I didn't mention that you think could be in the running for any of these conferences? Let me know what you think down below.